Republicans dead. Where I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay?
The women with the least likelihood of getting pregnant are the ones most worried about having abortions.
On January 6th of 2021, you had tens of thousands of people peacefully protesting.
No, it's not a right-wing conspiracy theory. It's not QAnon. It's real.
Hey, folks, it's Rick Wilson. Welcome back to the Enemies List podcast. We have an ally, not an enemy, on the show today. It's Dash Dobrofsky, and he is all over TikTok, YouTube, Insta. You have seen him responding and talking about the craziness in our universe right now, brought about by this moment with Donald Trump. Dash, welcome to the show, and tell us how you started the Gen Z voice that you've got here as somebody, as a young person, as a young voter, as a young activist who is confronting all of this minute by minute insanity that we're up against.
Well, it's so great to be here, Rick, and it's nice to meet you finally.
Likewise.
Well, it started for me actually way back during the George Floyd, the BLM, combined with COVID. I was just locked up in my apartment with my roommates, and for the first time, I was introduced to politics. I was I wasn't really involved in politics. I was always a Democrat, but I saw the video of George Floyd with the cop's knee on his neck. It was horrifying, and then I went to Fox News because I didn't really pay attention. And Fox News was covering that incident in such a way that they were blaming George Floyd and absolving the cop of the murder. And so I think that was the first time I was introduced to, there's a disinformation bubble happening here. Like yeah. But for some Americans, I think who don't pay attention, you don't realize it. You're just consuming news that you're not even aware is being spoon fed to you with some sort of narrative. Well, no, just after then I started tweeting. I started tweeting and getting involved in, getting loud. And all of a sudden I developed this online following, and I just kept it going and going and going. And then eventually I was, when Elon Musk took over Twitter, I prefer more long form content and writing. And I thought the app is just sort of a dumpster fire. So I moved over to Substack and have since then just been covering the news from, I guess, my perspective. And I've also been very disenfranchised with the left-wing media as well in their coverage. So, yeah.
And Dash's Substack, folks, you should check it out. It's called The Gen Z Perspective, which I think you'll find it valuable. I've also migrated to Substack in a lot of ways because it is it is the place where you can have a longer discussion on these things. But you're known for a lot of very punchy, short, Gen Z friendly content online. You've had a lot of success on TikTok and Insta and elsewhere too, though. Do you set out when you're covering different things, do you say to yourself, I'm going to talk about this thing on Substack, and I'm going to write about this thing on Substack, I'm going to cover this thing on TikTok, or do you sort of have a holistic approach to it where you just you're going to make the same point across your platforms?
I try to make the same point across all platforms, but I do think there are some stories that are better suited for written and digesting versus
Sure.
TikTok. You kind of have to be, you kind of have to grab viral headlines or ones that you think are going to resonate on first glance versus Substack. You can have more nuance and dive into, let's say, why the Doge cuts are terrible, but that might not be a good TikTok video because it's too confusing at first. So you can go into more complexity through writing versus TikTok. You kind of have to make it more mainstream, at least for what I do.
Right. So your audience, you've got a Gen Z audience. Talk to me about how Gen Z is processing this moment that we're in, because there was a lot of enthusiasm and excitement in Gen Z for something different this year and did not happen. So give me some perspective on where you think Gen Z is at right now.
Well, I think my perspective is different than a lot of the Gen Z. I think that, we did see a giant shift to the right among Gen Z, especially young men like myself. And you know what? And there's a part of me that I understand why people feel that like they're a fan of the Doge cuts. They're a fan of seeing funding get slashed from the federal government because, well, our generation, we've been faced with astronomical. The price of rent is insane. Grocery prices are high. Gas prices are high. And it seems really hard to get a job out here. I know some of my friends are, UCLA grads struggling to find a decent paying job that doesn't compare to the same pay at In-N-Out or McDonald's. So when faced with all of that, I think it feels good when we see someone like Elon Musk come in with, effectively, well, literally, he showed up at CPAC with a chainsaw. But the way they view it as, well, if they're cutting this funding from the federal government, that's our tax dollars paying for that. So we're going to see some of that money back. However, I think they're falling for, those cuts are not going to happen in that way. The cuts are just going to come to Medicare, Social Security, and rich people's taxes. And we're not going to see that money back.
I think they should prepare themselves for disappointment in
Definitely.
that front.
Definitely.
Because it is, I do think there was a cliche that, Gen Z is all far left. They're about climate, LGBT, but you're absolutely right to point out that the economic distress of Gen Z has pushed a lot of younger men toward the right because they're not getting solutions from the Democratic Party that they felt like were serious or that honored, where they are in the world right now.
Yeah. And so even though the Democratic policies are better for lower income, middle class, basically everyone other than the upper echelon tax bracket, it's this. I think a lot of young people view the Democratic Party as just weak and incompetent and not fighting. They have no streamlined messaging. They seem helpless. Even though when Republicans were, and this is me speaking just from an emotional perspective, I understand why people are frustrated with the Democrats. Having said that, there is a giant disinformation war happening online on YouTube. Right wing dominates the talking, or they dominate the airwaves in both traditional media and in social media. So we have no other than your voice is great. I try to do the same thing. Other people as well, but we are being outnumbered, and it's hard to fight against.
It does feel like there's a lot of artillery on the other side about on messaging, and I mean, look, I'm 61 years old, so I get that I'm in a significantly different generation, but I mean, I can't imagine how the Gen Z voters and Gen Z folks felt like when they saw the Democrats' rapid response team. The average age was like 74 years old. I'm so like, come on,
it's
people.
It's too old. And yet I don't have a problem with old. I think old people, I was a huge fan of Biden. I was one of the few Gen Z people who rode with him all the way until he got pushed out of the race. But I think, again, and then there's the problem, right? That you have someone like AOC who's a fighter and she's giving the right message. But again, she's also very far to the left, which is alienating to a lot of people. And it's like, we need a hybrid who has the AOC energy, but is in the middle somewhere that can bring people together versus alienating them based on policies.
I think a lot of the policy stuff the Democrats are very, very in love with, it doesn't feel to younger voters. I've seen some of this in focus groups. It doesn't feel to younger voters like, the response is often like, yeah, okay, that's important, but I'm still getting screwed financially, and I don't have a pathway to prosperity. I've read a focus group thing, and a young guy who had voted for Trump, they were asking him why. He's like, everybody tells me, go out, get a job, get married, buy a house, have kids. It's the greatest thing in the world. He goes, I can't even do the first part in the world as it is right now. So I do think that's why there's a sort of lure to that, like easy solution stuff on the right, because the solutions on the left are not connecting with those younger voters. And in my view,
I agree that the right is able to weaponize the economic discontent very effectively, even though they don't have solutions to it. Versus the Democrats are proposing status quo policies, which are actually good in theory, but nobody's feeling the benefits. And even there was a Politico report that just came out that said actually that the real numbers of the economy are not as good as how the Democrats were quote unquote fooled into campaigning on. somewhere along the lines of 23% of the population was experiencing some level of unemployment. So so this is Politico.
Yeah, not exactly a radical, cutting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's right though, and I do think like the stuff you do, I think cuts through because it's quick, it's blunt, it's directly on. Like you hit a lot of the pain points for people where they like where they really are, not where people think they should be. If that makes sense.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I think there is a lot of, we've got to talk to people where they are now. Even me, I was very optimistic during the election about everything. I thought she was going to win all of the swing states. And I said that. I predicted that the night before, and I was just proven so wrong that it made me pull out of, I think, my own disinformation bubble of like, okay, well, this is where we, like the liberals, think, but maybe the rest of the country clearly is experiencing something entirely different. And I want to tap in more to what they think, because ultimately they are who determine the elections, those 7 states.
Right. Oh, they truly are. And while they're not as purple as they used to be, I think all of them are still competitive with the right candidates. So talk to me about where you see Gen X going, or Gen Z going, excuse me, where you see Gen Z going in the next few years, because it real talk is what Trump's going to do is hand out a gigantic $4.7 trillion in the short term and 10.9 in the long term tax break to a couple hundred families and a couple thousand people in the country. And do you think that that's going to disillusion some of these people that have been lured over to the right in Gen Z?
Well, I think it's going to come down to who is able to message better when they fail to bring down inflation and when costs continue to go up. Because I think Gen Z is just looking for an immediate fix to our problems, the immediate solution. And we know, Trump's tariff threats, his inflationary tax breaks, these are going to make things worse. Even the latest Gallup poll said 20% of the country only views the economy as good or excellent. That means 80% are already discontent. So that's going to get amplified when it comes the next election. And I think Gen Z, again, we're terminally online, our generation. So it is going to come down not to the facts or who is to blame. It's going to be Trump and Elon Musk and Republicans who are to blame, but who is able to dominate the narrative and convince the voters that, oh, hey, this is a result of Biden, the wars. They're going to blame that for inflation, versus Democrats need to get loud and beat Republicans to the punch. Or I do think Gen Z could fall once again for Republicans saying, oh, he hasn't had enough time to implement his policies, which is a fear I have.
I think it's a legitimate fear, but I think your approach is correct. Is that it is always a battle of storytelling. It's always a battle of narrative. It's always a battle of framing, good versus evil, weak versus strong, right versus wrong. So who are some Gen Z leaders you're keeping your eye on going forward? Because one thing about politics, although it is an old person's business, once you're elected, there's the beauty of America is there's always a farm team of new talent coming up the chain. Who are you watching out there that you think is going to be an effective leader and communicator on the Gen Z side?
Well, who I really love is this individual named Maxwell Frost. I think he's a
oh, sure, I know Max. He's Floridian. Yeah.
So good, he's from Florida. So that's a state that's purple but gone red, but could maybe go back in the future. And I like him because, well, number one, he speaks like a regular person. He doesn't have this air of political establishment training behind him. He uses curse words on when he calls out people, which I like, and we can we can relate to that. And he's right. He's just a smart dude. He's a good looking dude, which again plays in politics.
Sure.
And
yeah, don't mistake it. It
does.
Absolutely
and
does.
As far as Gen Z women, I don't know if there are any in the political sphere right now, but I mean, that would be cool.
I guess Jasmine Crockett is Gen Z technically.
Oh, then
right?
she's a badass. Then she's awesome.
She's a fireball. She is a
So
fireball.
I like those two people. And then I think Gen Z media is on the rise. There's like Midas Touch, who's great. And you feature a lot of young people as well. I know even Resolute Square has some. Yeah,
Yep.
there's a guy from my UCLA, Victor Shi, who I think maybe still works for you guys.
Oh yeah, I know Victor very well. Yeah, he's
Yeah,
a buddy.
so
Yeah,
cool.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, there's a lot
Good
of
guy.
great voices. But I will say to counter that, there are also I keep my eye on more so the Gen Z villains, the MAGA.
Okay, talk to me about
Well,
that.
they have someone named I'm sure you know who Charlie Kirk. But
Of
what's so
course, yeah.
dangerous about him, or should I say persuasive, is that he visits college campuses
Hmm.
all year long. So not just during the midterms, but all year long. He goes across college campuses and he holds these town halls and these conferences. And one by one, they're spreading their message to young people through attacking the culture and like and making viral TikTok content from it. And so I do think there needs to be some sort of counterforce to that from the Democratic side.
Yeah, I think that an old rule in politics is that a plan beats no plan every time. And guys like Charlie Kirk have a plan.
Yeah.
They're going to go through and again, you're exactly right. He goes to college campuses. He goes out there, and he doesn't approach it like a old fashioned conservative. He goes and has like, we're gonna be loud and transgressive, and we're the revolutionaries now. And I think it has been effective in branding his organization, even though it's run by and funded by a bunch of like 90-year-old oil guys out of Texas. you know,
Exactly. And then also for the Gen Z, I know this is another point. You didn't even bring this up, but for me, I've been wondering how to combat what has clearly become, there's the issue of the transgender sports, which has become, it's just a taboo that when the Democrats talk about it, we just get railed on online. It's become an unpopular issue, even though we should still support legislatively creating equality for all groups. But how do you put those issues in the back in the back front of campaigning and just focus on what's going to hit with middle America and regular Americans without offending other groups? That's another dilemma that nobody wants to talk about because you're afraid of getting
yeah,
canceled for saying anything.
sure. I mean, it's one of the problems that we saw this year. I can tell you, as a former Republican, Republicans never spend money where it doesn't work. And when I saw they were spending first tens of millions and then hundreds of millions of dollars on those trans ads, and they weren't running them everywhere. They were running them on sports. They were running them on podcasts that were hitting younger men. They found a message that worked, and they spent $360 million plus or minus on it. Not just in the presidential race, they were doing it down to like county commissioner races in different states. Crazy, right? Because they turned a smaller group issue into the biggest thing out there for a lot of people. Sometimes Democrats have to understand that you don't have to have a policy fight. You have to have an actual fight. And so the policy fight was not don't go getting dragged into discussing whether trans issues are X or Y, good or bad, this or that. Go out and say, these motherfuckers are lying to you about trans stuff, not because they care about it, but because they don't want to talk about the economy. They don't want to talk about democracy. They don't want to talk about how bad they are at everything they do and how much they want to fuck you over by raising your taxes and this and that. It's tough for Democrats. They want to win on policy. They want to win on saying, here are the right ideas, and I'm going to talk about them, and then we're going to do them. And sometimes those right ideas aren't selling to the American public. And that's not good or bad. It's just where the American people are sometimes, and you got to let them catch up. It's like, I'll give you a good example. Republicans made a lot of hell over, and I used to get in trouble for this because my argument always was, I don't care if two legally consenting adults get married. I don't care. It's not my business. It's not the government's business. But Republicans ran against gay marriage for a long time. And right after 2004, a lot of them realized, including noted liberal Dick Cheney, who said, you know what? I love my daughter. She's gay. She's married. Okay, whatever. I don't care. It's not my business. But society had changed underneath them, and America decided we're done with this. We're fine with gay marriage. If consenting adults want to get married, that's fine. Sometimes society has to be you have to wait for them to be in the right zone to make a pitch like trans rights. And the Republicans figured out that a lot of lower income people and a lot of younger men, and a lot of dads with daughters who don't feel comfortable with a guy who was born a male and has some of those chromosomal advantages competing against their daughters in volleyball or tennis or track or whatever it is. And again, it doesn't have to always doesn't always have to be right. It's how they feel about it. The heart beats the head in politics every day.
That's the facts, especially in today's era where it's all about the branding. It's all about the packaging of the ideas. And that's why, you're a former Republican, or are you still a current Republican or
no? I'm an independent.
So I always felt, I say this in my newsletter a lot. I'm like, the Democrats need to just fight like Republicans and get smart like Republicans and message like Republicans, because Republicans to me are just incredible advertising agency, and versus the Democrats are like Boy Scout or hall monitors. It's just we have a terrible branding, so they need to incorporate your mind over their policies, and I think they would have a chance because we have the superior policies but inferior branding.
The branding is often problematic. So they called this election the podcast election. And I think that's a big deal, right? What do you think the election of, and by the way, with Obama in 2008, there was the Facebook election. It was the first time Facebook was used by a candidate really effectively. And so last year was a podcast election. What do you think the election of 2028 is going to be?
Anything that is not cable TV, because nobody my age has cable TV. I have a TV in my room. I have Netflix and Max, and that's it. So having said that, we all have our phones. It's going to be, I think this election was podcasts and social media. The next election is just going to be the iPhone election, or it all is all going to come through your iPhone. And yeah.
I think that's right. Because, I don't buy television advertising hardly at all anymore. I never buy broadcast advertising. I buy some cable once in a while if I want to hit older audiences. Everything else is digital advertising now. All of it. And I do think I think that's right. I'm fascinated to see how Gen Z's. So Gen Z's at that inflection point right now where they're just getting into the grown-up years. They're just getting into that work phase of their lives, hypothetically, if they can. And I'm very curious to see how Gen Z in 4 years or 3.5 years is voting and thinking and consuming media and making political decisions.
I am very much too. There's something that I think about. It's even when you with the way Gen Z we're confronting life right now as young adults. Sometimes I have friends, they don't even want to go on dates because it's just too damn expensive. So if it's too expensive to take a girl out for drinks, then like how can they raise how can they think about raising a family or getting married and they can't find a job that has upward movement? And it's like we're either being forced here to start our own business, which is next to impossible, or work some job at a corporation you hate, or so where they're going to be is all going to determine, I think, what the financial situation is and where the economy's at. And if whichever party is able to deliver the solution, or at least the feeling of a solution to them. And they're going to be getting that information from social media and their iPhones. So whichever party, the parties need to do all of their spending on social media ads and those avenues and abandon traditional media.
I think that's right. Well, one other question for you. So I am not a TikTok guy. At the age of 61, I did not think TikTok was for me, sort of as a native format. Is TikTok, after this sort of speed bump that it had, is it still as prevalent and influential in Gen Z as it was before the brief break?
Yeah, the brief 24-hour break. I actually think TikTok is bigger now. Well, I've seen a lot bigger, more interaction on there. I think people, once it was gone, there was a giant influx of attention toward it. And now that it's back, people are on it and they realize, oh, this is a pretty powerful app considering the government tried to ban it. It was also the only issue that Republicans and Democrats came together on, which, like, of course, it signals how effective it is, for better or worse. So,
yeah, I think it is. I think it's got an interesting position in our society right now, because it's in some ways was the first app that was almost impenetrable to people who weren't digital natives. I mean, it almost impenetrable. And I mean, my security guys are like, you can never put WhatsApp on your phone. Like,
yeah,
okay.
Something about TikTok,
Right.
which is really unique. I know it has,
Or TikTok.
TikTok has a bad flack for being just about dancing and brainwashing young people into believing CCP, like Chinese Communist propaganda, which I never receive on my end. But TikTok's the only app where you can start it with 0 followers, and you can just be a regular person, and you can have a viral video. That's just how the algorithm works there. It's an original algorithm that gives everyone a chance to blow up. Now, I sound like a TikTok shill saying that, but but it is cool. And by the way, I have seen your videos on my screen blow up too.
I'm told that happens from time to time. It's God bless you, TikTok people. I love you.
We love the CCP. No, I'm joking.
Yes. So, well, Dash, tell folks where they can find you across the various platforms and socials.
Thank you, Rick. Well, you guys can find me on the Gen Z Perspective. That's on Substack. It's my daily newsletter. You get it in the morning and afternoon and at evening sometimes. There's a lot to cover. And then I'm also on TikTok as my name, Dobrofsky. And I'm also on Instagram. But yeah, I would love to connect with all of you guys there. Let's keep this fight going and win this information war that we are in.
Well, Dash, you have an incredibly important voice in the movement, and I've really enjoyed talking with you today. Let's have you on the show again soon.
I would love to. Thank you so much, Rick. It's been awesome talking to you. Peace.
Thanks, man.